December marks the month of reconciliation. To commemorate this, the South African Council of Churches will launch its The South Africa We Pray For campaign. This campaign aims to outline common goals ahead of the 40th anniversary of the June 16, 1976 Soweto student uprising in 2016. To talk us through the launch as well as the campaign, we've got in studio with us Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, who is the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches. Bishop, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. We're in the month of reconciliation. How important is it to launch a campaign entitled The South Africa We Pray For during this month?
Absolutely essential. We find that the real big elephant in the room as far as South Africa is concerned is the issue of reconciliation. That it's something that maybe a lot of people identify with Nelson Mandela and his short tenure at the beginning of our democracy. And that since then we have not done much about it. I think that it entailed a number of factors. One was to make sure that we have changed at least the infrastructure in terms of legislation, in terms of the mindset of the country from the apartheid mindset to a new mindset of democracy. But we didn't do much about the soft issues of making sure that people actually change and that their attitudes, they become much more of a united society. But we missed something, I believe, in that Nelson Mandela himself did not only think about racial reconciliation. He actually talked about reconciliation in the context of changing the quality of life for people. If I may just go to a quote of what he said when he accepted the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report in 1996. He said, "Reconciliation requires that we work together to defend our democracy and the humanity proclaimed by our Constitution. It demands that we join hands to eradicate the poverty spawned by a system that thrived on the deprivation of the majority. Reconciliation requires that we end malnutrition, homelessness, and ignorance." That's education. It demands that it requires that we put our shoulder to the wheel to end crime and corruption. Now, these are the weightier matters of reconciliation that actually we have ignored over time. And this is not a fault of anyone. But, we take responsibility as churches because we do have a ministry of reconciliation. That's the mandate of the Christian church, and we're saying we would like to offer that to our society. And so we're launching next week, which is the Day of Reconciliation, the beginning of a campaign of the South Africa We Pray For, which will include ensuring that we've got a just and equitable society. And towards this, we then created studies on 5 themes. One was healing and reconciliation, to look at exactly what the status is in our country at this time, as you would have seen from the report that came out just the other day from the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation. And secondly, we looked at the issues of poverty and inequality, issues of the collapse of the family fabric, and the issues of economic transformation. What kind of trade-offs should be made in order for us to actually have the kind of what I call a reconciled economic dispensation? And finally, look at the issues of anchoring democracy, looking specifically at the fact that a lot of people are losing faith in the institutions of the state, and that we need to deal with the issues of maladministration and corruption in a way that ensures that we can reconcile people's aspirations with a well-established democratic system.
I see that the South African Council of Churches has commissioned some research into different themes which clearly highlight that South Africa has a very, very long way to go to fulfill this reconciliation that we all dream of here in South Africa. What do these themes entail? Talk us through them.
These are the very themes that are
these
referring to. Yes, these are the very ones.
Nothing more than that.
Well, there's a lot more to be done, but at least we zeroed in on these. For a start, there's lots more to be done. But we are saying that everything that we're talking about is actually anchored on the theme of reconciliation, healing and reconciliation. We recognize that, we worked with the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation that helped us to create a kind of a frame for this. And they gave us a model that I like very much that says, you need to look at this in terms of a 3. And that all the things that we see that bother us right now are really the fruits at the top of the tree. But there are roots at the very bottom, which are the values, the belief systems, the things that really are the source of all the problems that we have. And these things that come from the roots are then sustained systemically at the trunk level of the tree, where you now begin to get a point where you actually get a systemic way of managing and giving effect to what comes from the roots. And that then gives back to I'll give an example that I think is of moment because of the 16 days, that patriarchy would be at the roots.
Indeed.
It's at the roots. It's a belief system. It's a kind of, all people take it for granted. It's out there, it's underground in the roots. But then what this does is to give effect at the trunk level to a powerlessness of women. Systemically, everything is assumed that you cannot have a woman do this or that because that's now the powerlessness. Then where does this do? It leads us to the fruit level, where now men can actually rape women, men can undermine women, because that's the fruits that women experience. But these actually come from a root of patriarchy. So you can say the same about reconciliation, that when we see acts of racism at this level, where does the belief system lie?
Yeah.
It lies at the roots. So what the churches are doing is to deal with the roots level, and you can do this through the churches, which exist in every community in our world. So our contribution has got to be where we deal with every one of these things systemically from the bottom up.
Many men who fought during the 1976 uprising are also a part of this. What will their role actually be in it?
The project that we announced yesterday is part of this reconciliation agenda, and obviously is one of the highlights. But there are a number of projects. There will be a number. We'll be declaring a lot of these next week when we launch. This is just one of them, but it's a major one. It's a big one because it's probably going to draw a lot of people. It's really involving a lot of the churches. We have been able to pull together and facilitate through the good offices of the Senior Vice President of the SABC, Reverend Chikane, who was first approached for an interview by the academic that was doing the research. And it is saying that those who shot, they were teenagers, remember, these were kids prepared and organized and conscripted to go and shoot other kids in the township. So we're bringing together the shooters and the shot at.
Sure.
And they have come together to say, you know what, we're all in our late 50s and our early 60s.
Yeah.
We now know that we were dealing with something that should not have happened before.
Yeah.
We can make a difference. We're not going to bequeath this problem to our children and grandchildren. That's part of the issue. So it's just one of the things we're doing, but the real big deal here is that it's a systemic thing. The whole country is going to be part of it in many ways. And we've got another one as an example of what we're doing as far as poverty is concerned. And that really deals with one family at a time, one ward at a time. We're launching this on the 16th of December, which is the beginning. It takes us to the 16th of June and back to the 16th of December next year.
Just one final question. That's going to be one of the most powerful things to witness, what you just told us now. But just from your word and from your mouth, Bishop, how can we begin to make sure that a level of trust and understanding is brought between the racial groups of South Africa? How do we get to this point?
It's not just racial, it's also class. The studies that we've done tell us that those who are better off, black or white, are able to relate better. The LSM 7 to 10 meet and relate very well, you and I. But LSM 1 to 4, the poorest of our people, that's where you don't find reconciliation. What it means then is that if you pull more people out of poverty through a better quality of life, you will actually be able to find greater space for reconciliation. And that's what we should be doing.
Bishop, let's leave it there for this morning. Thank you for coming in. We really do appreciate your time. Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, who is the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, talking to us about some of the dynamic things that the South African Council of Churches is doing this month with the launch of the South Africa We Pray For campaign.